Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. I am your co-host, Thomas Vick, joined by our co-host, Seth Wilson. Seth, how's it going today?
Thomas, I'm doing great. We were comparing notes just before we started recording, and I was feeling like I had a pretty busy week and was kind of just not really complaining because we're grateful for work to do, but comparing notes, and you've had almost as busy of a week as I have. So I thought maybe that'd be a good topic to talk about today in terms of, when you have so many appointments on the calendar already and scheduled, how do you maintain all of the existing work that may be there, keeping track of it, making sure you're getting those other projects done in the midst of all the appointments and those kind of things. So, like I said, it's been a great week for all of those kind of things, but just a good time to reflect and maybe have a conversation about that.
Yeah, well, I put appointments on my calendar just so I can compete with you and try to outdo you. It's hard to do, but I just put something on my calendar so I say I have an appointment. Now, things are busy for you and for me, and that's a great thing. But it does present challenges. It presents challenges as to uh, providing clients the amount of time and attention that they deserve, challenges with actually getting the work done, providing direction to your staff as to how things are going, and just challenges of making sure you've got the mental clarity that you need for any given matter. And some days I do better than others when it comes to especially that mental clarity kind of thing. Things can get cloudy a little bit when you've got so many irons in the fire. But yeah, some practical tips would be a great thing to talk about today regarding busy schedules. And I think the best place to start is the beginning of the day. How do you start the day? And my practice is to make sure that I'm up early enough where I've got time to kind of get settled into the office, begin to take a survey of where things are in the practice and what needs my attention. And honestly, lately I've been just eating a little bit of oatmeal in the office. I just come straight to the office as soon as I can in the morning and eat here. I can be looking at my email a little bit here and there and kind of just slowly getting into the day. And those early morning hours are really important to me. They give me the mental clarity and the direction that I need for the day. So that's really where I start. And maybe I can ask you, Seth, what is your early morning routine to get the day started?
Well, there's a lot of information out on the interwebs, if you will, about the importance of a good morning routine. And I think I've tried to create a consistent routine for as long as I've been practicing law and never have a perfect situation, but I certainly agree with what you're talking about. The early morning hours where it's quiet and the team may not be there yet or the phone isn't ringing, most importantly, yet, where you can take some time to kind of gather your thoughts and plan out a few things. And so basically, I kind of have a Monday and Wednesday schedule and then a Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday schedule because on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, I try to do exercise in the early mornings. And Monday and Wednesdays and Saturdays, I kind of catch up on the other things. So like you, I like getting up, having some coffee in the morning, and starting to read through kind of what's going on for the day. I try to make sure that my reading is set up first. So I'm kind of putting that deposit in of I'm doing the stuff that I want to be reading and studying and make sure that's done before I open up the email stuff because as soon as you hit email, you're in a whole different world of other people's priorities and requests for you. Now, in our world, if you handle any kind of litigation, that's also when the court orders and different things come in. And so that one email could really affect how you had your day planned if it's triggering a response deadline or changing what you might have thought in light of how the court ruled on a motion. And so those emails come out in Indiana anyway about 2:30 or 3 a.m. in the morning for the day before, and so those are really important to process. So those are the ones I'm always kind of looking for in order of importance when I do get into the emails to see has this changed anything that I kind of had on my plan? And if not, then I can just process that and move it into the next phase. So I do a quick scan of email and then I try to shut that off and really just spend a few, 10 to 15 minutes really going through the day's tasks. We've talked about how we utilize the Clio practice management tool to create those tasks. And so I'll look through that. And frankly, on any given day, I'll have 18 to 20 Clio tasks that have shown up just from different types of work that have going on, plus my appointments for the day. And so try to go through those pretty quickly and just identify, what are the top 3 of those that I'm going to be able to get done today and move off some of the other ones, or know that, hey, while I'm on hold later today on the phone, I can work through, a couple of these that may be like archiving the files or moving them out of the active into the pending status or something like that. So that's kind of what I call my pregame ritual, if you will, before I get to the office. I try to get that done or that workout in. That becomes kind of important to me as I start the day.
Yeah, I have a similar routine, kind of like what I was mentioning to you. Early morning is a great time to get some exercise. I mean, I think that's kind of the theme of these early morning hours is take care of yourself so that you can take care of others throughout the day. You need some time to kind of gather some steam, get energized for the day, and so whether that's going for a run, doing a kettlebell workout, doing something. Those are the things that I like to do, but I'll throw those in there in the morning sometimes as well, and just get energized and ready for the day. But then, the support staff comes in, the other attorneys are in the office, and then, we're off and running, and the calendar has all of its appointments. For me, my typical schedule, I may have 2 or 3 estate planning appointments, and each one of those is about an hour and a half long. So depending on how they're set up in the day, I may have gaps in my schedule. I may have an hour break before my next appointment. So that's, kind of where I need to be very purposeful in how I manage my time. You can't really change what the appointment is. You're going to have to be prepared for that appointment. So, just kind of getting into the preparing for the appointment, I'll take 15, 20 minutes before the appointment and review the file, look at the notes, and try to remember names of the client and the client's family, and just be familiar with the file prior to actually meeting with the client. So when I've got a busy slate of appointments like that, I'll try to make sure that I'm refamiliarizing myself throughout the day on who I need to be talking to. So that's kind of how I get prepped. I take a few minutes before the appointment and get ready for the appointment.
Do you build that in as a separate calendar entry or just as part of your entire meeting with client entry on your calendar?
It's kind of just part of the calendar entry. I don't have a specific calendar event reserved for 15 minutes to get ready for this next hearing. It's just what I kind of do on routine. I don't know. Do you build that into your schedule?
No, we do. Typically, we'll have, especially if it's a new client appointment, we'll have those set for a half an hour in terms of how much we're kind of budgeting time wise. But we always put an hour on that event so that afterward I can make sure that I've done a good job of capturing my notes. We talked about that, making sure that we've sort of identify the areas that we may be serving. So if we're preparing a fee agreement later, we've got that information. Or if the client we were able to help them in that appointment and there's not any further need for us to be involved, we've got a good note of that so we can keep that in the file as well. So that's kind of how we do that. I don't build in a buffer, if you will, for prep. My staff knows how they like to, or how I like to handle the calendar. And so they'll try to keep at least a block in between to allow me to do what you're talking about, getting prepped for that next meeting as we go. That leads me to another question on that topic, Thomas. Are you managing your own calendar or someone in your office putting appointments on for you?
little bit of both. Mostly people are putting calendar events on my calendar. I'm not answering the phone primarily. So, my paralegal will put those initial consultations or sometimes a follow up consultation on my calendar. But, and this is actually something that I've been kind of thinking about changing, when I'm in an estate planning appointment, I'll go ahead and schedule the signing appointment. And if we're doing a design meeting, a design meeting, just because I know that the client is right there and it's just the next step that needs to be done. I know my calendar. We can just go ahead and get it on there while I'm developing a rapport. It's kind of developing a rapport with the client as you're scheduling that next appointment.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of value in that as well because you're starting to be able to look at the calendar and figure out where in the calendar you're going to be able to get the work done that's required to meet the deadline, right? So that's a good thing. I think that's one of the balances that's very difficult as you are starting out is figuring out, are you going to try to manage your own calendar and keep everything going? Or if you delegate that to someone else or allow people to use your website to book time on your calendar, for example, how are you going to manage that? And understanding the primary method is this, whatever you chose to do, but then you have that secondary obligation that's there. So I've found sometimes I've delegated out, hey, we need to schedule a deposition, for example, and I'll have someone go through my calendar and provide my availability. And then I see on my calendar I'm open on a particular day. So I may schedule something which had already been given out to keep for that deposition day. So there's a lot of those situations that can be a little challenging if there's not a clear routine that you normally do.
Yeah, apologies for the lawnmower that is running. I'm thankful for the landscaping at my office building, but sometimes the timing isn't the best. But yeah, I think that's great as far as, handling the next appointment, knowing exactly where you're going to be able to get the work done based upon your schedule. And the support staff doesn't always know what work and needs to be done and also how much time it's going to take. And so, some estate plans in my practice, maybe I need 5 weeks instead of 3 weeks to get things done. And so the attorney's, in my opinion, often in the best position to schedule that next appointment. I think it's really important that, and you alluded to this, that when you have the appointment with the client and they decided, okay, we're going to hire you to be our attorney for this matter, that you get an engagement letter to them as soon as possible. And I try to get that engagement letter to them actually during the meeting so that I don't have to worry about it later on. And then also, as a part of that, I make sure that I get my notes into the system, because if I've just written them down during the meeting and I don't get them into the notes then online, then I don't have a reference, and that can mess up the whole matter in a big way. And you just have to be really disciplined about that when you're moving from one appointment to the next. It will never be more fresh in your mind than the moment that your client leaves your office. So just take a little bit of time to get those notes into your system before you move on to the next client. I think, you can avoid a lot of mistakes that way.
Yeah, I think that's such a vital piece of advice, Thomas, where when you get back to your office, for example, so if you meet with someone in a conference room and then come back to the office, or if you met with somebody in your office, the temptation is going to be, I have all these things I need to get done, but you're not quite finished with the appointment yet until you've captured all of that, sort of made sure that everything that you know you need to do is documented in some way. Then you can move on to the next one. So inevitably, what will happen is if you're back to back to back, a phone call or someone will come in and say, I need to catch you before the next appointment because I know you're busy today. And if that pile of notes, or if you just grabbed a sticky note, and started writing down, that's going to get lost in the mess if you're not careful. And I think that discipline and that habit of every time I'm closing a meeting, I'm spending 5 minutes to review and summarize everything, and make sure it's inside of the next step in the system so everybody has what they need is really a vital habit to get into.
And this is where I plug Clio Duo, where you can use your law practice management program to create a note for you and dictate to your computer, and then it'll create it for you, and then you can just review the note that it's accurate. That will save you a lot of time rather than typing it out. And we've talked about that on prior episodes.
Yeah, and I think that exercise, Thomas, of where you can sort of speak out loud, it's a lot like reading a paper that you have written or a motion or a brief out loud, and you start hearing it like, oh, that didn't make sense, or something like that. That's what's so good about being able to voice dictate to the computer what your notes are, because you're trying to synthesize the information and make sure that you've internalized it. So as you're strategizing or coming up with a plan, you have a good understanding. And you may have written something down in your notes that needed some more clarity because it's almost like your shorthand method of capturing the information. And then speaking it back into the computer is a great way to sort of work with that material again. And then that final edit gets it into there for, I'm always writing for what happens if I'm not here and somebody needs to get caught up on this file. Will they be able to understand what I put in there? Not unless I change a little bit about how I took the note. And so I think that routine gets you to handle it, a couple, 3 different times. That really helps you know the client situation, and the unique things that are going to come as a result of that case. And it makes it more memorable for you. So when you do have a day where you've got 4 or 5 families that you're interacting with, you can kind of keep those families together. And I don't know about you, but it seems like when I'm doing multiple estate plan meetings in a day, the families have similar situations. And so you confuse family A with family B. So anything you can do to help make sure that that family knows you are paying attention. You are, but you don't want this, just something to slip up or the notes to be unclear as to which family was which.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really good point there about making sure that your notes are accurate and being able to keep families straight throughout the day. We're in the people business, and people don't feel very good when you get their names confused and you get their kids mixed up, but they really appreciate it when you do get their names correct, their kids' names, and you're familiar with that. Just from an estate planning standpoint, it's easier to communicate with the client when you say, well, your son is John, your daughter is Mary. What do you want to happen with Mary's portion? What do you want to happen with John's? Rather than talking about sons. And if they've got 2 sons, then which son are we talking about? It's better to deal in specificity. So I take the time to be familiar with the client file, and then take the notes that are needed to put information into your system so you can refer back to it. So you're moving from one appointment to the next. You've done these notes. They're in the system. What other tips might you have, Seth, about how to deal with a busy day?
I think one big thing is make sure that you have a block of time toward the end of the day to make sure you went back through everything and got it captured. Because there will be times when you're in between meetings that, hey, the court called and the judge is setting a quick pretrial conference here. We had to squeeze it in between this appointment and that appointment. Well, if that happens, I'm not going to say, I'm sorry, Your Honor, I need to do my process. You answer the court's call, right? So when that happens, you need to have a system for kind of a day close down. And so we try not to set appointments that are going to push us up to close of business necessarily. It happens occasionally just to accommodate client schedules, and that's okay. But you want to make sure that you keep that discipline of, okay, if I didn't get through that event correctly and didn't get all my notes in, at least by the end of the day, I know I'm going back in. And how I do that is I just want to make sure, like, I go back through my calendar events, make sure that I have time entries associated with them, whether they're billable or not. I want to make sure I'm tracking that time. I'll look at my activity list and make sure that that's accurate and I didn't miss anything. Because if I try to do that the next day, I'm not going to remember. And so I kind of look through all of that. I use different tools throughout the day. I have one particular tool that I use on my computer to take notes, and I always date the note. So I know I've got it here. Worst case scenario, I can go back and add that into the system with a copy and paste pretty quickly. But my goal is every day I've got that in, and that will be my reminder to, oh, did I add time for this? Or did I give the next instruction on what needs to happen here? And I'm a big proponent of trying to get through all of your email every day and get it filed where it needs to go. So there are times that I will actually snooze emails in Outlook that are, I know I need to save them, but during the middle of the day when everything's going on, I don't have time to profile the record, so to speak, and add in the information. I'll just snooze them till 4:45 that day, and then try to deal with all of those in a 15-minute block and go through that. So those are a couple things I do. How about you?
Yeah, you're kind of talking about where I am in this very moment. I went from one appointment to the next, and I didn't have time to put down my notes. I had to go off site for an appointment. So my prior appointment, I had notes and I needed to get them in, but I haven't. So when I'm done with this call, I'm hoping that I am able to get those notes put into the system so my support staff knows exactly what needs to be done. But yeah, finding a time towards the end of the day, if you haven't found it yet, to finish things up, and get things in position where you know what you need to do the next day. You kind of think, well, I didn't get this task accomplished. Let's move that over to tomorrow so that can be the priority for tomorrow. I'm not sure how much we've talked about this, but you mentioned 18 tasks that you have in Clio. Depending upon the the time required for each task, you may not have time to do 18 different tasks. And I think it's a principle of time management that you don't really focus on 18 or 20 tasks. You focus on 3, 4, maybe 5 tasks that are most important during that day, and you nail those. So as you're ending the day, you kind of need to be thinking about what are tomorrow's priorities going to be, and then you can hit the ground running in your early morning routine the next day. That's kind of how I do it. That's really how I do projects in and of themselves. If I'm writing a brief or something like that for a court, I'm on a writing project, I end up writing and then I get stuck because there's some kind of thought process that I need to click on something. Then once I get that idea that I need to kind of expand upon, that's actually when I stand up and I take a break, because I know that's where I'm going to pick up. And then boom, I'm actually back and I've got progress. I've had a break, but I know exactly where to pick up. And that's how I've done writing, ever since I was an English major in college, and, all the law school papers and all that kind of stuff. I like the momentum that builds, from one appointment to the next, from one day to the next, even within one paragraph to the next in a writing project.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I think when you know when you're done for the moment and how you can sort of get that there, because a lot of times you're looking at the clock and that's sort of driving the decision making, because, oh, it's almost 5:30 and I'm still at the office and we have a 6 o'clock meeting or something like that. And so I think being able to capture where you are in a way that sort of primes the pump for getting restarted the next time you're able to touch on that project is really important. And having that thought sort of written out or leaving an instruction to future you when you come back of, oh, yeah, that's where I was going to go with that, it is really helpful. So whatever that methodology is, whether you leave that in the brief and leave it highlighted so you can find it quickly, or you write it down of remember to start here or something like that, it's really important. And then just one other tip, I think, on tasks in and of themselves. And this is a principle from David Allen. We've talked about his book, Getting Things Done, before, but the idea of you're writing out the next action. That's your task. And it's the very next physical thing that you need to do. And so if you're finding yourself tripping over these tasks over and over, it's probably because you haven't really defined what the next physical action that you have to take to move that forward, right? So if you have to call the dentist to schedule an appointment and you don't want to do that, well, you don't have the phone number, right? Like the next thing you got to do is get the number. And so once you have the number, you're like, I already have the number. I might as well just call it. And it's that domino effect. And so as you're thinking about being clear and writing clearly, I think that applies to tasks and calendar events and email subject lines, for example. Those kind of things are really helpful to those you're communicating with. And I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else, right? Like just trying to get this all figured out. And that's something that I'm continually working on of, okay, how am I writing this? And I think I've mentioned before, a lot of times my tasks in Clio are actually written as a billing entry. And so I use the description then to put in that very next physical action that I need to take to accomplish whatever that billing entry is actually going to be.
Yeah. Build momentum, however you can do it. Build momentum throughout the day, from one day to the next. That's the thing to do. And just the days compound. One good day leads to another good day, leads to another good day. You string those together, you'll get a good law practice going for yourself.
Yeah. Well, good discussion today, Thomas. Thank you for sharing kind of how you go through that. I hope that's helpful for folks who are getting ready to or are just, working on launching their law practices. Lots of fun. I did see today that the Indiana State Bar Association has got a law practice management startup page that's coming soon, or maybe available by the time you watch or listen to this. Some great resources out there in terms of some materials, which is awesome. So check that out if you're in Indiana. And then, Thomas, how can folks find out more about Lifetime Legacy Lawyers?
Just go to youtube.com and search for Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast, and you'll see us there. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, share the videos so that other people can see them. Apple Podcasts as well. I'm not as familiar with where we are with the podcast audio, but anywhere you can get your podcast almost is where you'll find us. Yeah, so we're the Lifetime Legacy Lawyer podcast. We're helping lawyers launch.
Thanks, Thomas. We'll see you next time.
Take care.